kick ass. And I'm all out of puppy.
Well, well, well. It's Thursday. It's December 14th, the year of our Lord 2017, and I be Zeppelin, comma, bloviating, one each. That's all that's necessary because one of me is two of you. There's a reason that I'm the Zeppelin. That might have something to do with it. Ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you. There's going to be a theme at the beginning and a theme at the end, and it's the current theme since today. There were an amazing number of revelations made here in the United Snakes of America. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I got to say welcome to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. You got to belly up to the bar. We've kept you a seat, and it's great to see you back. Snowball is going to be our bartender tonight. He pours with the best of them, and the lava lamp is in fact lighted to my left, your right. If you happen to be watching on the SHR Media Facebook page, going live right now, if you happen to be watching on the SHR Media YouTube channel, you can watch live. And of course, if you just want to listen, you got to balance your checkbook, clean up your dead budgie, or clean your fish tank. You can always listen at shrmedia.com. Now, when you go to shrmedia.com, we have an additional little thingy that you can take advantage of, and it's called the chat room. And in the chat room, you can chat. And so, as a matter of fact, let's back out of this here baby right now. And we'll check and see if, okay, the chat room is up and working well, and all is well. Wow. It's Author Week here at the Saloon, and because it's Author Week, we spoke earlier this week on Tuesday to thriller author Matthew Betley, who has 2 books to his name right now. And we, son of a bitch, we had a full 1-hour interview with Matthew because, after all, he was new to the Saloon and we wanted to introduce everybody to him. He has 2 books. The first is Overwatch and the second is Oath of Honor. And he's going to have a 3rd book out May 22nd of next year, I believe, just before Memorial Day. And we discovered some pretty amazing things about him. And like, for example, he can't tell us what his job is, or I'll have to be clipped. Lordy, I don't want to be clipped. Lordy, did I just say that? Did I just try to repeat James Comey? Bad BZ. Bad BZ. Don't do it again. Yeah, apparently so. In any event, we have at 8:15 Pacific Time, 11:15 Eastern Time, and 1793 and 155.7 seconds in Bolivian time. And we're going to have Terrence McCauley, thriller author Terrence McCauley, who has 3 books to his name in the series of James Hicks. And it's Sympathy for the Devil, it's A Murder of Crows, and the 3rd and newest one that he's going to be talking about tonight is A Conspiracy of Ravens. But before we do that, I actually did get some good news today. And so that's why we're going to do this. And I'm going to explain to you why this is good news and just what it means and sort of the relationship over the years.
It's time for happy stories and good times.
And I tell you, folks, I think this really is a happy story, and I'm very glad to hear it. I used to be a great devotee and aficionado of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hugh Hewitt used to broadcast out of Southern California, and his producer was a guy named Dwayne Patterson. And Dwayne Patterson is on Twitter, and you can find him at Radio Blogger, RadioBlogger. Like me, Dwayne has had cancer, and Dwayne went through some remarkable lengths, I think it was last year, where in order to combat this cancer, which he had in his throat. Now, he speaks for a living because he's the producer for the Hugh Hewitt Show, but he also has and appears on shows of his own. He appears on a show with Ed Morrissey at least once a week, and so this is what makes Dwayne cash and what keeps him going. He went to Germany last year and did some really exotic things to try to tamp down the cancer, and it came back. Well, here's a tweet that just came out today from Dwayne Patterson, and I tell you, sir, God bless you. You have so many people fighting for you in your corner. It's rather astounding. The tweet went like this. Today was a big day for me on the cancer front. It's come back twice a year after I thought I beat it. Today was the scan in that time frame. What's left of original lymph node is shrinking, and there is zero detectable energy from it. Totally inert. Total remission. Thank God. And I just have to throw as many prayers as I can to Dwayne Patterson and his wife. And he has so many people that are pulling for him in his corner, because I was a group of Hugh Hewitt devotees, and we were called Tribbles. And then, unfortunately, Hugh moved back east to D.C. He actually bought a house in Virginia, but he is in the studio and physically moved back east. And now, because of the time differential, it used to be that Hugh was on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time. I can do that. Hell, 3 p.m. Pacific time is like mainline junky political time for me. I'm typing posts, creating stuff for the show. So 3 o'clock, hell yeah, I'm on it. Well, that was PM drive. Now Hugh is in D.C. on AM drive, and he's on at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, BZ, what's wrong with 6 o'clock in the morning? Well, it's 6 o'clock Eastern. BZ lives on the left coast in occupied Fornicalia. That means that old BZ would have to be up at 3 a.m. every day. And I was in the chat room with Hugh Hewitt damn near every day. And that means I'd have to be up at 3 a.m. every day. And guess what? These days, because BZ is retired, sometimes that's when he's going Betty by. So in any event, God bless Dwayne Patterson. This is great news. Prayers. Folks, if you have some extra prayers you can kind of toss his way to keep things going his way, that'd be wonderful. So great news for Dwayne. There was an article that came out today, and it's from the Lid blog. I've had Jeff Dunitz on the show before. Jeff Dunitz is a wonderful guy. Jeff Dunitz is from the East Coast. I've been on his shows a whole bunch of times. He doesn't necessarily come on my shows very much because, again, it's that whole East Coast, left coast thingy. And there's 3 hours difference. And so he'd have to be up at 11 o'clock right now to be on the show live. And Jeff did that once. I get it. I understand it. But anyway, you have to read Jeff Dunitz. He's at lidblog.com, Lidblog, lidblog.com. This is a very interesting story which involves the military, U.S. military. The headline is, U.S. Air Force F-22 Raptors fire warning flares at Russian jets over Syria. That was today. I'll wager that's something that you didn't hear. 2 U.S. F-22 Raptors intercepted and fired warning flares at 2 Russian Su-25s over the tightly congested airspace in Syria along the Euphrates River on Thursday. Not since the Cold War has the United States been this aggressively engaged with the Russian military in fronts around the planet. Russian President Vladimir Putin's cocksure international diplomacy hasn't created a loyal following among global citizens in recent months, as his military's bizarre behavior in theaters such as Syria have caused major concerns on the world stage. Their possible complicity in a deadly chemical attack and their likely role in the cover-up became apparent only after U.S. forces took the liberty of raining Tomahawk missiles down on the airbase from which the attacks originated. And I'm sure if you remember, that occurred quite early on in the Trump presidency, around February, if I'm not mistaken. Similar threats have come in the case of North Korea as well, as Kim Jong-un has repeatedly threatened to annihilate the United States with a thermonuclear bombardment. Russia, sticking their nose once again where it doesn't belong, warned the U.S. once more about a retaliation for a preemptive strike. Now, amidst all of this turgid turmoil, the skies over Syria now have become the latest chessboard in the international sort of urination competition where various countries leave their marks, so to speak. The Russian fighters had crossed an agreed-upon deconfliction line that runs parallel with the Euphrates River. The U.S. and its Syrian partner forces, known as the Syrian Democratic Forces, operate on the eastern side of the Euphrates, and it's a region Russia and its Syrian regime allies are supposed to steer clear from. The F-22s fired warning flares to convince the pair of Russian fighters to leave the deconflicted airspace, according to Eric Pahan, a Pentagon spokesman. In late September, U.S.-backed Syrian fighters claimed Russian jets bombed one of their positions near a contested gas field, killing several of their forces. Air Force's Central Command spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel Damian Pickert, told CNN that the Russian pilots were flying dangerously during that particular encounter. One Su-25 flew close enough to an F-22 that it had to aggressively maneuver to avoid a midair collision. So, isn't that lovely? Isn't that wondrous? Now we've got Kim Jong-un pushing the United States on its front, and now we have Vladimir Putin pushing the United States in Syria. I wonder, how did we get here? And I think you know the answer. It goes something along the line of 8 years. And the phrase, leading from behind. How do you lead from behind? That was Obama's strategy. And it's not working. And because of Trump in the White House, various personnel have decided that they're going to push back to try to see what it is that Trump will take and what he won't take. Now, I find this story kind of interesting, if for no other reason than this. It was this week, or late last week, that Putin said that he's going to be pulling the military out of Syria. And yet, having said that, we have this particular incident. As for answers on how this current diplomatic dissonance between the U.S. and Russia will end, no one seems to know. Putin, who's once again seeking re-election, a very important point. No one is going to run against Putin if they value their life. And so this might be nothing more than Putin grandstanding to show the people of Russia that he's a badass. Well, he can ride on a horse with no shirt on, that kind of a thing. Putin, who is seeking re-election, could be the Russian alpha male. Well, I'll tell you what. It sounds like we have somebody calling in right now. So we're going to put that on hold for right now because, as promised, I told you folks that we're going to be speaking to a particular individual. It's Author Week here in the Saloon. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome back to the Saloon thriller writer Terrence McCauley. He is author of 8 books, and now 9, if I'm not mistaken, since the publication of his newest novel, A Conspiracy of Raisins. Jesus Christ. Raisins. Now that'll
be the cozy.
Now that's how
I'm not making fun of cozies, by the way. I'm just saying that's the kind of title.
Isn't that now? That's a great way to start an interview, isn't it? Okay. I swear to God, his book is called A Conspiracy of Ravens. Okay, Ravens, and it's released by Paulus Books. Okay, a little background. Now, I originally spoke to Terrence on August 9th of this year, following the release of his book, A Murder of Crows. And at that time, we kind of got to know Terrence a little bit, and some of his background, his history, and his being a proud native of the Bronx in New York City. So Terrence was born and raised in the Bronx, New York, and spent the first 27 years of his life there. He graduated from Fordham University, and he wanted to be an FBI profiler, and I thought, that's a hell of an admirable goal. And then he changed his major to political science. So Terrence had the luxury of being able to walk to school all of his life, which I think is a pretty damn cool thing. And he's been working in government ever since. Now, his biography, there are some people who didn't hear Terrence the first time. So I'm going to go into his CV a little bit. He's an award-winning writer of crime fiction and thrillers. His third novel in the University series, A Conspiracy of Ravens, is available in all bookstores and ebook formats. The other novels in the series of his protagonist, James Hicks, is Sympathy of the Devil and A Murder of Crows, and they were also published by Paulus Books. Terrence has also written 2 award-winning novels set in 1930 New York City, Prohibition and Slow Burn. In 2017, Terrence's World War I novella, The Devil Dogs of Bellewood, won the Silver Medal for Historical Fiction from the Military Writers Society of America. Here's the big deal about that, and I'm going to emphasize this again, Terrence, because I think it needs to be done. You buy that book, and all the proceeds from that book go to the Semper Fi Fund, which I think is an amazing thing. So, folks, if you don't do anything else tonight, number one, yeah, you got to buy Terrence's books, that's for sure. But the other thing you want to make sure that you don't forget is get The Devil Dogs of Bellewood, because the cash goes directly to the Semper Fi Fund. In 2016, Terrence's short story, Erkambalash, I think I screwed that up, you can probably tell me, was nominated...
Cambalache.
Cambalache? Okay. Was nominated for the best short story in the ITW Annual Thriller Awards. He's had other short stories featured in Thuglit, Spine Tingler Magazine, Shotgun Honey, Big Pulp. If I had... That's a great name for a stripper. And now featuring Shotgun Honey. I think she'd get a lot of cash, okay? I like that name. Big Pulp and other publications. He's a member of the New York City chapter of the Mystery Writers of Association, Mystery Writers of America, the International Thriller Writers, the International Crime Writers Association, and the Military Writers Society of America. That's a hell of a CV, as far as I'm concerned. And Terrence became a in the first conversation, we discovered that Terrence became a political junkie at the age of 10 in 1984.
God, you got a good memory.
When the conventions were starting, and that was Mondale and Reagan. Yeah, old BZ's, so old enough to remember that crap. And so basically what happened is that Terrence started following politics pretty early in his career. And politics and history, if I'm not mistaken, they've always been kind of a big love from you. And
yes, they have.
You also come from a big line of storytellers, and it seems like everyone in your family, for a while at least, if I recall correctly, was either a priest or a nun.
Right, yeah. And I had one uncle, my Uncle Jimmy. He was a Monsignor here in the New York Archdiocese, and he was the chaplain up at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women. So he had Jean Harris and the Long Island Lolita and a whole bunch of other celebrity inmates while he was up there. So there was always plenty of stories to tell around the Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner tables, I can tell you that.
Well, the other thing is, not only does Terrence come from a long line of story writers, but he enjoyed illustration and drawing. Although he is kind of insistent that if also, again, I'm not mistaken, he said his ability to draw peaked at the age of 15. which I thought was
It
interesting.
It did, yeah. I wish that wasn't the case. But it was, and now I've concentrated on writing.
Yeah. What is it that Dirty Harry said? A good man has to know his limitations. I feel
That's
sorry.
correct.
I feel sorry. I signed up for the Joe Kubert School of Cartooning in the 80s, and I was accepted, and then I decided I didn't want to go all the way to the East Coast, which was a really big mistake on my part, because I would love to have gone to that school. Terrence also admires author Richard Matheson, because Richard Matheson is like the Unitool guy in terms of the writer world. He could write in any number of genres. And again, I always enjoyed this. One of the first books that he thought that it would be really neat to read was James Clavell. And if anybody knows anything about James Clavell books, they're about 12,000 pages long, and you need a cart to pull behind you. So it's not like he started into reading like dime novels or anything like that. No, he went right for the big stuff, right for Alexander Solzhenitsyn, that kind of stuff. Good God, mister. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I got to welcome back a really interesting cat, Terrence McCauley, back to the Saloon. So welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, pal. It's great to be here.
We are here today, gathered before everyone, because you have a new novel. And like I said, it's entitled A Conspiracy of Ravens. It's third in the series of the James Hicks books. And again, just so if you want to buy all three, the first one is Sympathy for the Devil, and then Murder of Crows. So,
right.
Terrence, tell us what you've done with James Hicks and how he impacts your newest novel, which was just released this September.
Right. Well, as in with any series, the first one, Sympathy for the Devil, I try to set up the universe, and I try to show the reader exactly what they're getting into. I talk about Hicks, show his unique abilities as a counterintelligence agent. I talk about the tools that he has at his disposal, which is his experience, and also a computer system named Omni, and that allows him to gain access to places that some people might not be able to gain access or information to. The goal of that was to supplant the nerd character that you always see in these kinds of stories these days, the person who's better with computers than they are with people. I wanted to get rid of that. I just wanted to concentrate on the tools that Hicks had at his disposal to try to hunt down the people who were trying to launch a biological attack in New York City. At the end of that book, I won't tell you how it ends, but he does capture a person of interest that is of interest not only to the university, which Hicks works for, but also to the NSA, the CIA, and the DIA. And I talk about the battle that he has with them in A Murder of Crows. I wanted you to see that Hicks is not only just fighting the stereotypical Muslim terrorist who wants to kill everybody. That's not the kind of book I wanted to write. He also has to fight against his own government to do the right thing. His own government doesn't know he's on their side. It's a clandestine agency, and he's caught literally in the middle of two worlds. And he has to fear his own country as much as he has to fear the people he's trying to defeat. Then in this book, A Conspiracy of Ravens, which came out this year, I tried to add a little bit more of Hicks' personality, more of his motivation, and to really flesh out how the university works and how it functions in trying to find the true enemy who's behind all of this. That is all of the events from the first two novels, which is the group called the Vanguard. And the Vanguard is made up of ex-Russian and ex-Chinese spies whose overall goal is to overthrow capitalism in the Western world. That's pretty much what they tried to do.
Now, at this time in your third novel, and it doesn't involve raisins, Hicks has been kicked upstairs now. He's the dean of the university. And so one thing that I would like to make clear for folks that are interested in reading thriller novels is this is involving intelligence, counterintelligence, spies, that kind of thing. But people think that the university is just another name for the CIA, but I submit that they couldn't be more wrong. In fact, it was the CIA that tried to wipe Hicks out, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, in the murder of Crows, yeah, the CIA and the DIA, because they know he has a person of interest. He won't surrender that person, and they are doing their job. They're the good guys. They're nobody that the audience is going to root against, but at the same time, they're going up against the protagonists, and that's why I wanted to. That's why I wrote the books the way I have, because I wanted to make them a little bit more interesting, a little bit different than what you might expect in a techno thriller or a spy novel.
Okay, so for folks that are just tuning in, I'm speaking to Terrence McCauley. He's an author from New York, and he's written 3 books in the James Hicks series. Can you explain to folks a little bit more what the university is, what it isn't, and why you cannot confuse this? You cannot confuse these guys with the CIA. They are not the CIA.
Right. I mean, that's one of the fun aspects of writing a book about a group like the university. The university's history is that it began in pre-World War II days. Actually, right after World War I was when it began, and then it became an actual organization in 1933 New York. I have a book coming out this late in the summer of 2018 that actually goes back to the 1930s and shows you exactly where the university starts. It's a book called The Fairfax Incident. I'll talk more about that later. But the university then went through World War II, was folded into what became the OSS, and then in A Conspiracy of Ravens, we find out that Eisenhower, when he said he didn't trust the military-industrial complex, when the CIA broke off onto its own, he also kept the university separate. So the university exists under a presidential charter, but it's unfunded, so it's not overseen by Congress, and they have to make their own living. They have to fund themselves, and they do that through a variety of very colorful ways. So they're the good guys, but they're not beholden to anybody, and their legitimacy has been questioned by various presidents throughout the years. I hint at that in all 3 books because although Dan Brown is a very successful novelist, I didn't want to write another Da Vinci Code or the Lost Symbol or something like that where there's a ton of expositionary sentences there. I wanted to make sure it was as clean and neat as possible. And so that's why I hint at it along the way without giving you a full-fledged explanation all at once.
We have about 2 minutes before the bottom of the hour break, but I want to note that you start this novel, Conspiracy of Ravens, with James Hicks under surveillance again. See, you started A Murder of Crows with that as well. Now, the first thing that popped into my brain housing group was, are you trying to make some kind of a statement, or are we all just paranoid?
Well, we're not just paranoid. You're only paranoid if they're not watching.
That's
and you know, I don't think there's people watching all the time, but I think they certainly do have the opportunity to do it. They, you know, I mean, that's been proven by a lot of the various leaks about technology and methods that have happened over the last 4 or 5 years. They can definitely do it, and it's just a matter of whether or not they want to do it to someone at a particular time. You know, I've had friends of mine say, well, what's the problem with that if you're not doing anything wrong? My question is, define wrong.
Well, yeah,
what's wrong?
And the corollary to that is, this is the United States, isn't it? And we do have freedoms in this country, if I'm not mistaken. It's funny you should mention that because there's an article that just came out that I'm going to go over. Sarah Carter writes for The Intercept, and there's an article that just came out today, if I'm not mistaken, the FBI's use of NSA foreign surveillance programs, and a pretty big revelation, it would appear, in terms of, gee, the FBI and the NSA seem to be working hand in hand, and they don't particularly appear to be answerable to much of anyone. Folks, we're listening to Terrence McCauley. He's the author of 3 novels in the James Hicks series. We're going to be taking a little bit of a break. It'll be about 3 minutes or so. And then we're going to be right back. So, folks, don't go away. Go to shrmedia.com. You can go to the chat room, get involved there, and we're going to be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Sean from the Sackheads Radio Show. Also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Times are dark. The people are misled by corrupt politicians, lied to by establishment media, and deceived by the false messages of Islam. A nation looking for direction needs a guide. It needs a man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker, SHR Media, Pundit Press Radio, and YouTube through the SHR Media page for a different kind of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because the truth is not always pleasant.
In a world controlled by corrupt politicians,
You got a business. That you didn't build that.
a team of ordinary men emerge from the ashes to give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. Sackhead Sean.
Dude, I'm not saying calf for the stupid club.
Sackhead Clint.
All good friends of ours usually show up drunk.
Also starring Sacco as the producer.
I'm a little bit drunk, cause I'm drinking.
They are the Sackheads Radio Show. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific on shrmedia.com.
The bloviating Zeppelin. He's big-footed enough radio shows to last a lifetime, courtesy of Sean, Clint, Ken, and Jersey Joe. Now it's time for him to waddle on his own 2 feet via the glorious SHR Media. Gird thy loins for the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. Coming soon to ossicles near you. Excelsior.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, live and direct, right here on SHR Media, the SHR Media Network on shrmedia.com. We are speaking to thriller author Terrence McCauley. He was on earlier this year in August, and he's got a new book out. It's called The Conspiracy of Ravens, and that's exactly who we are talking to right now. I'd like to make an observation readily and up front, and I don't make this observation lightly, Terrence, but more in terms of what I consider to be a very positive observation. From book to book, you have, in my eyes, clearly improved as a writer. Your newest book, A Conspiracy of Ravens, I think really showcases your writing chops. Now, obviously, writers want to hone their craft, but in my opinion, and everybody normally says, well, this is his best book ever in reviews, but Terrence, I really have to tell you, I think this is clearly your best book.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I know that authors always say that whenever anybody compliments them. But for me, my writing is everything to me. My writing career means everything. And so when anybody says something like that, I really do take it to heart. And I also take the critiques, too. I mean, I've had people give me really worthwhile critiques, which is why the books have gotten better over the years. With this one in particular, I tried to do something new. I ever want to get in a rut. If I do this until I'm 75, 80 years old, I don't want to get into a rut. So you'll notice I change for the first time in my writing my points of view from different people.
Yes.
And the first 2 books were told strictly from Hick's point of view, which was what I was comfortable with when I was writing my 1930s works. and that would fit the time and the era and the style I was going for. And then I was getting used to this world that's known as the university. And then by the time The Conspiracy of Ravens came along, I was pretty comfortable with it. But I realized that I could tell the story in a much more dynamic way by splitting up and introducing different characters. Because my ultimate vision for this series is to create a group of characters that you're going to want to read about individually, not just James Hicks. So Hicks would always be the main cog in the wheel, but then there'll be different gears that come out of it that people will like to read more about. So that's what my goal is.
You've sort of answered my next question, which is it kind of starts with writers, I'm sure, I know, are often their own harshest critic. And so how do you feel about your writing? I think you have clearly progressed. And do you think that you are progressing in the fashion that you want to go? And certainly since the beginning of the James Hicks novels.
I am. I'm really happy with the way everything is starting to click along. I mean, I wrote the novella that you were kind enough to mention earlier, The Devil Dogs of Belle Wood, in between in between Sympathy for the Devil and A Murder of Crows, because I was trying to change up what I was working on. I didn't want to get into a rut, like I said earlier. And a good friend of mine who retired from the Marines told me, I can help you write the book, and also there's a great cause if you're looking to do to make a donation. And then he told me about the Semper Fi Fund. So that's why all of the, as you mentioned earlier, every single penny made on that goes directly to the fund. I didn't get an advance. I don't get any money off any of the residuals. It all goes straight to them. So in that one, I tried to do a bunch of different. I tried a bunch of different styles as well. I wrote a lot more violence, a lot more war, a lot more combat situations, and I'm always trying with every project I have to do something a little bit different, whether it's a novel, a short story, what have you. I just did a short story about Hicks that's set in France, where he's a minor character, but a very influential character. That's part of an anthology.
So basically you're telling me that you feel pretty good about the direction that you're going right now, and certainly with A Conspiracy of Ravens. And I have to say that, I don't know whether I matter or not, I could see a perceptible difference to me between A Murder of Crows and A Conspiracy of Ravens. And quite frankly, I think that's a hell of an accomplishment for an author.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to do is show you, one of the criticisms of the earlier books, for example, was that I didn't show enough about Hicks and what motivated him. I did that because I didn't want to sacrifice pace for background. And I think I got that because of some of the critiques I've heard over Dan Brown's work, that he just had whole data dumps where there were expositionary paragraph after expositionary paragraph. And people tended to, it was interesting, but people blew through it and then they got lost. And I didn't want to do that. And I certainly didn't want to have that scene. As someone who reads a lot of this literature, you know what I'm talking about, where you have a couple of guys sitting in the room and they're leafing through the file, and then they casually go through all the awards and places where James Hicks was based. I didn't want to do that. So what I did was I tried to show you who he was as subtly as possible in a subtle world. And so the narration itself, not to get too geeky about it, but the narration itself and the tone of each story was part of the story itself. And then in this one, I decided that it was such a complex story. If I just told it from Hicks' point of view, there'd be a lot of those expositionary sentences and paragraphs that I hate. So better to tell it from the bad guy's point of view rather than having it just be from Hicks' point of view.
There was one very important thing that you told us last time when you were here in August, and you said that, I guess in your mind, you have a theme song for every character that you write, and you said for James Hicks, it's the Johnny Cash version of Hurt, and that resonated with me because you and I spoke briefly about the last, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 Johnny Cash albums that were produced by Rick Rubin. I said,
Right.
those were some of the finest albums ever from Johnny Cash. And that reminded me, as soon as I started going into this book, that statement from you came back. And I had no idea how spot on that statement was until I read this book. And then a little light bulb went on over my head as it hurt. Okay, all right, I get it.
I'm glad about that. And I was also honored to be that Joe Clifford was good enough to allow me to be part of an anthology that was dedicated to Cash called Just to Watch Them Die. And the short story I submitted for that one was a Hicks short story, and it was called Hurt, based on our conversation. So, take a look at that one, too. That was another anthology that I was in.
So I got to ask this. Is James Hicks sort of like the Punisher, but like with a bigger backup band and no skull logo?
He is, I would, to compare him to somebody in modern day literature, I'd probably compare him more to the Longmire character than anybody else. That's who I would say he really is, because the Punisher tends to at this point in the series anyway, I wouldn't compare him to the Punisher. In the next book, again, without giving it away, anybody who's read this Conspiracy of Ravens knows that James Hicks is a very different man at the end of this book than he has been in the previous two. And the next book, you see a man who was hollowed out a bit and is a much different person than who you have read about. But he is completely recognizable, but different. So that's why I would compare him to Longmire.
It's funny you should mention that, because I also am a really big fan of Longmire. I think Robert Taylor's a hell of an actor, and I was sorry to see
he's a hell of an actor, yeah. He is, and the books are great, too. They're fantastic.
I have to ask this, though, because a lot of the things that you do are kind of music-based. What music do you think James Hicks listens to?
Oh, I've always figured out that he doesn't listen to music. Okay. He's that kind of guy who, there are different characters in the book who do listen to music. There's Roger Cobb, who loves techno and dance music and stuff like that. But with Hicks, he's not a guy up until this point who's driven by anything. He's driven by an absence of something, and he's gone through his whole life without ever really loving anybody, or he's just known what he's good at and does it. And he doesn't feel sorry for himself that he has missed out on love and that he has missed out on a more promising career, or that he had to change his name to James Hicks. And in The Conspiracy of Ravens, we find out what his real name is. He's a guy who's missed out on a lot, but he doesn't care, and it doesn't bother him, and he knows it should, but it doesn't, and that's what makes him different.
Like you said, that leads into this next question, actually, really nicely. We discover some more things about James Hicks in A Conspiracy of Ravens. We learn about his loss. We learn about his challenges. And his character, like you said, really gets fleshed out more. Are you getting to know your characters as you go, as they encounter life? Or in your mind, do you already have their backstories all fleshed out?
When I started writing this, I knew the kind of story that I wanted to tell with Sympathy for the Devil. And then by the time I've gotten to A Conspiracy of Ravens, these characters have completely taken different turns. They've definitely fleshed out a lot more than they had been in the past. Especially you got a guy like Roger Cobb. I expected him to be a one-and-done kind of character. I wanted to move on to somebody else. But it's just when I started writing A Murder of Crows, it didn't feel right without him in it, and he's not necessarily Hicks' sidekick. He is not, because it's not a buddy book wherein you have the main character who has a code but won't cross over a certain line, but he's got the psychopathic buddy that'll do that for him, like Spencer and Hawk. And there are a bunch of other examples to cite, but I didn't want that. I wanted Hicks to be his own dangerous person as well, but Cobb was just so fun to write, and sick people that they are, they love the guy, so I kept the character coming back, had him do more interesting things, and in A Conspiracy of Ravens, you see him be more tactical than he ever has been before. Before he was just the Inquisitor. This time you actually see that this guy can handle himself.
Villains, I would suspect, are just they're a hell of a lot more fun to write. So we spoke about the university. The university is a mobile group. The technology you feature is buttressed by that. You refer to James Hicks, his digital compadre, as a handheld. And I remember also from last time that you were one of the first writers, if I'm not mistaken, to feature biometrics in the devices that James Hicks uses. So tech is obviously big in your book, like you mentioned, like Omni. Is tech a big thing in your life as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I know a lot of writers hate to say this, but I don't. I have so many books in my house that it's easier for me and for my marriage if I just have the e-books on my iPad or something like that, because my wife is tired of stubbing her toes on them, and if I bring in one more book in the house, the cat will be living in here and I'll be out on the porch. And also, yeah, I mean, I write a lot on my phone and my tablet. I write, I can usually get in about 500 words a day on my commute, so my thumbs kill me. But then on the weekend, I pull it all together, and that's how sometimes I'm able to get the books churned out so quickly. So, and it's funny that you mentioned that from Sympathy for the Devil about the handheld and biometrics. When I did that, I had a lot of people email me saying that that's impossible, that will never happen. You are never going to be able to have a cell phone. It was in the ripe old age of 2015, or way back in the Stone Age, when they said there's no way you're going to be able to have biometrics on a cell phone that size. There's no way it'll happen. And then the very next year, they came out with the thumbprint, and now you've got iPhone X coming out that's going to read your thumbprint in your face. So, you know, and I got that idea strictly from knowing what they were doing in Europe and all public knowledge, and also the Snowden leaks, and knowing what they could do behind the scenes as well.
Now, in this book, we make a huge discovery, and you referred to it already. You introduce us to the Vanguard. Can you tell us a little bit more about these mopes? Because it seems to me like they're really kind of a motley contingent of damn dangerous folks.
Right, yeah, and I wanted to do that without making them Bond villainish, too. You know, I didn't want to have Smersh or Spectre or something like that. This is a group that comes into play at the end of A Murder of Crows, when they realized that these jihadis who launched a bio attack, they weren't really behind it. There was a radical that was being financed by a group, and it wasn't an Al-Qaeda type group. It was this group called the Vanguard. And the Vanguard is a group of patriots in their own right who are ex-KGB, ex-Russian, and ex-communist spies from China who are trying to overthrow capitalism and, as I say in one of the books, get the band back together. They want to at least move through Asia, and they want to weaken the U.S. so much that they can go all the way through the Middle East. So that's their goal, and they've been operating for years, and people knew about them, of course, because these intelligence agencies aren't stupid, but they thought they were just arms drug dealers, maybe some human trafficking here and there that they couldn't, that didn't really raise to a high threat level for some of these agencies. But in this case, they find out that they're much more dangerous, and they're waging a proxy war against the United States. And that's what Hicks uncovers, and they become his nemesis for the next several books.
In this book, and again, you tell me if I'm incorrect, it seems like you blew the damn doors off of the university. Were you intending to do that and just kind of rip that thing apart?
I did, because I wanted to, it's funny, I tried to have where I was in my writing career reflected in how the book took off and how the book was crafted. And what I wanted to do was show complete upheaval and complete change for everybody involved. And that's exactly what I do in this book in the terms of the style I wrote in, changing points of view, the complexity of the plot. All of that really played into it. So yeah, I do. I blow the doors off of everything. There's a lot more action in this book.
By the way, I got to tell you, Patel joining with Hicks, I dig it.
Oh yeah, from the second book, and then he's in this book. Yeah. I wanted to make him to be, because look, it's a far more diverse world now, and I think that if you're going to have a timely book, it has to be, you have to have important characters in there who aren't just token characters to round out a checkbox on a publisher's list. And thank God Polis doesn't have a list like that, but instead, I wanted to have them be interesting. I wanted them to be capable, and I wanted them to contribute to the plot. And going forward, I see Patel as a huge part of the university, and I'd love to have him have his own book someday. I'd love to have Scott have his own book. There's a bunch of offshoots I'd love to have on this. So, and hopefully, with Polis's help, I'll have the chance to do that.
Now, you said, I think you said last time, and you said earlier today when we first began to speak, that you're writing sort of an adjunct book to the series called The Fairfax Incident, which takes place in 1933 New York. And it gives us some insight into the university itself.
Yes.
Can you give us a little bit of insight into that? In other words, here's going to be that book. Are you going to build off of that and maybe another one after the Fairfax incident?
Right. The Modern University series kind of starts in a book called Slow Burn, which is currently an ebook, also published by Polis Books, where I introduce you to the character of Charlie Doherty. He's a corrupt New York City detective back in the Tammany Hall era. Reform has come to New York City, and there's not much of a market for a corrupt New York City detective. And he finds himself out to pasture on the graveyard shift. And in Slow Burn, he comes upon a murder of a woman in a cheap flop house that ultimately involves the richest, most powerful family in the city of New York. And he figures, if I get enough dirt on these people, they'll pay me some hush money, and then I can get it. But as he starts digging into this case, he becomes fond of the family called the Van Dorn family, and he tries to do the best he can by them. At the end of the book, it becomes a murder-kidnapping case, and he rescues their son, and unfortunately, he's a sacrificial lamb for the reformers, and they kick him out of the New York City police force. However, the child's family is wealthy and connected, and they set him up in his own private investigation agency. In the Fairfax incident, we see Doherty as a well-to-do private detective where he's assigned by Mr. Van Dorn to look into a matter of when is a suicide not a suicide. It's when it's murder. And it's about a wealthy insurance executive in 1933 New York who has killed himself, but his widow is convinced he didn't kill himself just because he was depressed. He did it for a reason. And Doherty has to find out what that reason is. And that's how you find out exactly how the university comes to be and all the acronyms and everything. And hopefully that will take you through. My plan is, and this is up to Polis, to take you all the way through the pre-World War II era, World War II, Cold War, all the way up to present day with varying characters.
You and I are both aficionados of history. I learned more by just reading novels and books and nonfiction in high school than I did from any history teacher because I was motivated to do it myself. Just a brief observation. Terrence, can you tell us what's next for James Hicks? You're going to go in that other book, but any particular directions that you can reveal about James Hicks and his next journey, shall we say?
Sure. I'm already, right now, I'm in the process of writing my second Western. I've got one Western that's going to be coming out. Yeah, I have one Western that is going to be coming out, I hope, next year in 2018, although I'm meeting with the publisher about that tomorrow. It's from Kensington Press. It's called Where the Bullets Fly. It's being published under my own name, so I don't have an alias or anything like that. And I'm working on the second book in that series now. That's a complete Western that takes place in 1888 Montana. But I've already got the first draft of the next James Hicks books done, and it's called The Moscow Protocol. And with that one, you see, without giving away the ending of A Conspiracy of Ravens, you see a very different James Hicks, different motivations, different frame of mind, different focus, but with one mission, and that's to try to combat the remaining forces of the Vanguard. And the way he does it is he uses a lot of the people that I've already introduced you to accomplish that. And a set of dominoes have to fall in a certain way for that to happen, and that's what drives this book.
Saying that you wanted to write a Western, well, that you are writing a Western, I got to tell you, I want to read it, period.
Okay.
End of statement. You are becoming, I guess, the living embodiment of Richard Matheson, just like you said, and you admired him because he writes in anything and everything. And the first comparison I thought of him was Elmore Leonard, because Elmore Leonard got his start in writing Westerns, and then he transmogrified over into mysteries and whatnot. And I think Elmore Leonard's, most of his stories are based in Detroit, if I'm not
in the Detroit area. Yeah, and then you had Robert B. Parker, who also wrote a series of great Westerns. Some people know about the Everett Cole. I might be getting them mixed up, but Appaloosa was the first one, and a fantastic Western movie.
I loved
and then
the
he
movie.
wrote several others.
Yep.
Oh, I loved it too. And Ed Harris directed it, I believe, and that was a fantastic film. People don't talk about that film.
Viggo Mortensen was in it in his 10 gauge.
Yep.
I enjoyed the hell out of that movie. Okay,
that was a fun film.
It's almost the top of the hour. Finally, can you tell us where you can be found on social media? Can you tell us where your website is and any other points that you might like to display on the planet?
Oh, sure. It is you can find me on Facebook as TERRENCE Macaulay, MCCAULEY. I got a Facebook fan page. It's Terrence P. Macaulay. My website is www.TERRENCE Macaulay, MCCAULEY.com. And I'm also on Twitter as @TMacaulay_NYC. So, and my books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, in libraries. If the library doesn't have it, they can certainly get it, and in all independent bookstores, too, which I highly recommend.
Folks, we've been speaking tonight to thriller writer Terrence Macaulay. He is author of Sympathy for the Devil, A Murder of Crows, and his newest novel, A Conspiracy of Ravens. Terrence, it was a pleasure and a blessing to have you on the show again. I'd love to have you back anytime, and certainly when you publish another book. And again, just as I said last time, I really thank you again for staying up so damn late for myself and the listeners. I mean, that's it's only 9 o'clock here on the left coast, but over on you're talking it's damn near it's past Betty by time. It's midnight over there in New York.
Yeah, it's midnight, but it's definitely worth it. So, and your audience members have been great to me. And, all I ask is that people leave reviews. They don't have to be 5-star reviews, but if you've read my stuff or are going to buy something, please review it on Amazon and Goodreads. And even just 5 words helps.
Okay, folks, Sympathy for the Devil, A Murder of Crows, A Conspiracy of Ravens. Go to Amazon or any bookseller. You can order his books there. By the way, I got to say, nice photo of you and Marlo on your website.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed that. Terrence, thank you, sir, and take care.
You too, pal. Thank you.
All righty, sir. Be safe. Bye-bye. Wow. I enjoy speaking to authors, thriller authors, because they're what I read. And if I read this stuff, I love to talk to the people who write that stuff. The first hour is gone. We're moving into the second hour, and when I say we're moving into the second hour, you think you were talking politics earlier today? We're going to be talking a hell of a lot of politics when we come back. Folks, thanks for listening. Live and direct, it's Thursday, December 14th. It's almost Christmas time, the year of our Lord 2017. Come right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, it's Sean from the Sackheads Radio Show. Also one of the owners here at the SHR Media Network. Are you opinionated? Have you ever wanted to do your own show? Have you ever heard somebody like the Sackheads and go, yeah, I could probably do that better? Well, now's your chance. Send me a 5-minute clip at sackheadsradio@gmail.com, and maybe you can be part of the SHR broadcasting team. sackheadsradio@gmail.com.
Beware, the Jersey Takeover is here. Every Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can catch Reaver Common Sense Show hosted by Jersey Joe, right here on shrmedia.com. Only Jersey can deliver hell like no one else. So consider this your fair warning.
Human by race, Christian by faith, American by nationality, and conservative by choice. Reverend Ralph J. Chittum Sr. is the right guy on SHR Media from 8:05 to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. And if on the rare occasion I am ever wrong, I will still always be right. The right guy on SHR Media.
Power brokers use corrupt politicians, deceptive Islam, and lies from establishment media to turn the once shining city on a hill into the city of the blind. What do the elites fear? One man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me at SHR Media, High Plains Talk Radio, Spreaker, iTunes, and YouTube for a different kind of commentary on the unpleasant blind guy. Because truth is not always pleasant.
Hello, I'm Tim Hart. I'm the guy BZ hires due to his shameless contract with the SHR Media Network to voice his promos. He'd like me to tell you that the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be found on SHR Media Network, Spreaker, and YouTube every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American media maggots won't. You'll find that the speech is free, but the drinks are not. There, in the saloon, just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, BZ is sending his personal drones of freedom into the wheelhouses and ossicles of lovers of sovereignty and liberty nationally and globally. Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, BZ swears that no rights were harmed in the making of this promo.
This is Jersey Joe, host of the Reverb Common Sense, and you're listening to SHRmedia.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, folks, wow. Great interview with Terrence McCauley, a thriller writer who has a ton of books to his name. And it's time for politics, because so much happened just in the past 3 days and this weekend. And a lot of it comes from, ripped from today's screaming headlines of Captain Obvious. Here's an article that just came out and proves once more the obvious. This is from Politico, and the headline says, Nikki Haley says U.S. has evidence Iran is violating the UN resolution. To which I say, oh, fuck, are you, no, that not, are you kidding me? No, that can't be. Well, Obama, leading from the rear, tactical strategic retreat. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley, standing before military debris that she claimed to be of Iranian origin, offered Thursday what she presented as indisputable evidence of Iran's UN resolution violating actions in the Middle East. The nuclear deal has done nothing to moderate the regime's conduct in other areas. Aid from Iran's Revolutionary Guard to dangerous militias and terror groups is increasing. Haley said at a press conference at Joint Base Andrews, where reporters were invited to inspect the evidence on display behind her. It's a ballistic missile and advanced weapon systems. They're turning up in war zones across the region. It's hard to find a conflict or a terrorist group in the Middle East that does not have Iran's fingerprints all over it. What about that? Was it that Barack Hussein Obama simply could not grok, or I suspect actually refused to understand? Because if you remember the C-17 flying from the United States across the pond in the dead of night with pallets full of cash, literal cash. That's not just an embarrassment. Barack Hussein Obama wasn't just an embarrassment. He's fucking dangerous. And proved it again and again. Now, where, except in the mind of a leftist, where possibly do you think that fucking money went? Sorry for the bombs. Well, where it went was to feed and fuel terrorists all across the Middle East. So let's distill it down to its basics. Your taxpayer money was converted to cash, strapped to pallets, stuck in the back of a C-17 Globemaster, flown across the ocean, landing in Iran, and your taxpayer money paid for weapons and personnel and Muslims in the Middle East to kill U.S. soldiers. And Barack Hussein Obama did that on purpose. Because that's his mindset. That's what he thinks. That is his philosophy. Every proper, I was going to say right thinking, but every proper thinking individual could see the consequences of these actions on down the line. Except Barack Hussein Obama and his regime. They either could not or refused to. Philosophically motivated, thinking, I still do not understand this thinking, thinking that if they be nice, that these regimes will turn around. They'll just do a 180 one day, as if the curtains will part, the light of day will come down on them, and they'll realize the error of their ways and change their ways immediately. Even George Bush bought into that bullshit when he decided that, you know what, we need to take North Korea off the terror watch list. Because isn't that a motivation? Sure, that's a motivation. So North Korea will play better in the national sandlot. And I think you know how that went. There's so much stuff to talk about tonight, and I know I'm not going to get it all. One of the other things that occurred today is that in terms of leftists, as far as they're concerned, the sky is falling. The sky is falling because if you recall, back in 2015, net neutrality was activated by the Obama administration. And you can look at all of the other things about net neutrality today in a strictly partisan vote, because it was a partisan vote that enacted net neutrality via the FCC commissioners at the time. It was another partisan vote that decided to go back to pre-2015 when net neutrality was enacted. And as far as leftists are concerned, the sky is damn falling. I have a question. How is it that the internet, that we managed to do anything on the internet prior to 2015? How is it that everything on the internet just didn't fall apart? Because that's what they're saying is going to happen now because we've removed net neutrality. Let me tell you a few honest things about net neutrality. I'm going to make this rather succinct. Who profited from this? Google and some of the big telecoms. They won't tell you about that. Net neutrality was an attempt to make sure that the playing field was leveled for everyone. Well, that sounds great, doesn't it? Fairness is such a good thing. Let me make an analogy. Everyone wants to drive a car. under the net neutrality philosophy, shouldn't you be able to go into your nearest Rolls-Royce dealership, because a Rolls-Royce is a car, right? And in terms of fairness, we want to make sure everybody has everything. Why is it fair that someone has the ability to write a check to buy a Rolls-Royce Phantom and some other people can only afford to drive a 1983 Toyota Tercel? It's because they don't have the money. So when you striate levels of the internet and you want to pay more money for higher speeds, what this was going to do is remove all of that. Everyone had one speed. That's it. Period. Statement. End. And so, in a capitalistic sense, if everyone had one speed, and instead of bringing everyone up and lifting all boats, we decided that we're going to bring an arseload of those boats down in terms, well, that's fundamental fairness, isn't it? If you have the cash and you want to pay for screaming internet, you can do it. Or you can go back with net neutrality and one ring to fit them all. That's about as much as I'm going to say about net neutrality. I don't think it's a terrible thing. Now, in real terms, what did net neutrality do or not do, and what will the removal of net neutrality do, and how will it affect your daily life? I think I can summarize it like this. You haven't noticed, and you won't tell, and you won't be able to tell. And I think I've summed up that as succinctly as possible. There was, there was an incredible amount of stories today, but this was one of the biggest. And this emerged. Now, this particular article I have is from the Associated Press, from AP. And the headline is Senator Comey's remarks on the Clinton probe heavily edited. I'm going to stop right there. This is an ongoing, as I said Tuesday night, and I'm going to say from now until probably 2020. So you kind of put your mind in this. These are the hard expectations of a soft coup in Washington. There is a soft coup going on right now in Washington, where elements of various bureaucracies involving people who were never elected, i.e. the deep state and others, and folks who were appointed mostly at higher levels. Now, there are some bad actors at the lower levels, and I'm extremely disappointed in the FBI and the DOJ about that. Most of the bad actors are at the upper levels. That having been said, we're undergoing a soft coup. It is an attempted retaking by force, in a sense, of the Oval Office from the person who lawfully won the elected, and his regime and administration has been lawfully inserted into the Oval Office, and people hate it, and they're going to do anything and everything that they can, and are currently doing so, to make sure that that regime, lawfully elected by the rule of law, is overturned. Here's the story. A draft statement former FBI Director James Comey prepared in anticipation of concluding the Hillary Clinton email case without criminal charges was heavily edited to change the tone and substance of the remarks, a Republican senator said Thursday. I'm sure that pretty much doesn't shock you in any fashion. The thing that I see about this is it's starting to get out. These things are starting to get out, and there will be more, many, many, many more. Some of the edits proposed to the May 2016 draft obtained by the Associated Press appear to soften the gravity of the Bureau's findings. Comey, for instance, initially wrote that the FBI believed that Clinton and her aides were grossly negligent in their handling of classified information, language also contained in the relevant criminal statute. I said back in 2016 that Comey was a blithering idiot when he laid out the charges, a beautiful timeline to make charges, to recommend charges to the DOJ, and then did a 180. And he said that there had to be purposeful negligence. To which I replied, no, there are crimes of general intent and crimes of specific intent. He insisted in that statement that Hillary Clinton need to have specific intent to cause all of these other things under UC codes, under USC codes. And because I know, I'm not stupid, that there are crimes of general intent and specific intent, if you read a statute and it says something similar to with the intent to, then that's a crime of specific intent. The crimes to which he was referring under the U.S. Code were not crimes of specific intent. That's when I knew James Comey was a fucking liar. Not a prevaricator, not an, oh, I may have made a mistake. No, he's a liar. I can't make it any more clear than that. The text was edited to say that they were simply extremely careless in their use of a personal email server, a phrase Comey adopted for his July 5th public announcement that the FBI would not be recommending charges. Question. Jim, why did you have to make a public statement? Couldn't you have just said and called up the DOJ, as most FBI directors have done with investigations in the past, and said, Loretta, hi, it's Jimmy. I'm not recommending charges. Ball's in your court, dear. See you later. Click. He's the only director that's taken it upon himself to put himself on Front Street time and again and again and again. Now, obviously, these fucktards have big egos. James Comey is no different. But it was his insistence on doing that that got this entire ball rolling in the first place. And it's going to come back and slap him upside the head like a terribly sharpened boomerang. It's going to come back, and it may cut him off at the neck. Comey's ultimate statement also omitted language asserting that the sheer volume of information classified as secret at the time it was shared made it reasonable to believe that the former Secretary of State and her aides were grossly negligent. In addition, while Comey initially said that it was reasonably likely that hostile actors had gained access to Clinton's email server, the text was edited down to say that such an intrusion was only possible. The original version noted that the FBI had worked with partners in the intelligence community to determine whether the server had been compromised. While it was unclear what significance this had, it was omitted from Comey's final text. Though the FBI had not yet interviewed Clinton, then the Democrat leader, the candidate for president at the time the statement was drafted, FBI officials had already determined that criminal charges were probably not warranted and had begun thinking about how to present that conclusion to the public. Hillary Clinton wasn't even interviewed yet. At that time, they had no idea specifically what she was going to say, and yet it was prepared. Fix, meet in, and FBI, DOJ, do you wonder, folks, why people don't trust you anymore? Comey on May 2nd circulated a proposed draft statement to other senior FBI officials, laying out the basis for the eventual decision against recommending charges for Clinton and her aides. Senator Ron Johnson, however, this is where he steps in. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, the Republican chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, said he had obtained from the FBI a copy of Comey's original draft with proposed line-by-line edits from other FBI officials. It's not clear from the document which officials suggested what changes, though many were incorporated into Comey's July 5th announcement. In a letter To FBI Director Chris Wray, Johnson said edits to Comey's original remarks appeared to change the tone and substance. He asked the FBI to identify the officials who had proposed the changes. Another in a series of continuing clear to me evidence that the fix was in. When is it ever that you have heard or seen evidence to indicate that an FBI director is purposely wordsmithing a decision that, number one, wasn't his to make, though he made it, and number two, fell completely on the side for Hillary Clinton, not against her? This was purely political. Period. End of statement. The letter comes in the midst of disclosure of politically charged text messages sent by one of the agents on the case, Peter Strzok, in 2015 and 2016. That's a bag full of shit as well. Strzok, who was in the room as Clinton was interviewed, let me repeat that again, knowing what you do about Peter Strzok. Strzok, who was in the room as Clinton was interviewed, what do we know about that? There's no record of that interview. Was later assigned to special counsel Robert Mueller's team to investigate potential coordination between Russia and the Trump campaign. He was removed from that team last summer following the discovery of negative text messages about Donald Trump. Bobby Mueller. Why was it that we're just now discovering in December that there was an issue with Strzok and you had him say bye-bye in July of this year? Where's the transparency? I don't really see it. Not much at all. Then you have the new FBI director, Christopher Wray. Let me say, having worked for the FBI, being a sworn U.S. Marshal, so I have worked in the federal service and for the FBI, the last two directors disgust me. They make me want to throw up. It's bad. I've never seen it this bad. If you thought that all of a sudden things were going to be oh so much better of Christopher Wray, with Christopher Wray as the new FBI director, you might want to disabuse yourself of that as you listen to this interplay between Representative Jim Jordan and the new FBI director, Christopher Wray. And this is about the Mueller investigation.
Director, was Agent Peter Strzok the former deputy head of counterintelligence at the FBI?
I don't remember his exact title, but I believe that's correct.
And he's the same Peter Strzok who was a key player in the Clinton investigation, the same Peter Strzok who interviewed Cheryl Mills, Huma Abedin, participated in the Secretary Clinton's interview. And he's also the same Peter Strzok who now we know changed Director Comey's exoneration letter, changed the term gross negligence, which is a crime, to extreme carelessness. Is that
Peter Strzok? He did it.
The same guy?
Well, Congressman, I don't know every step that the individual you mentioned was involved in, but certainly I know that he was heavily involved in the Clinton email investigation.
Thank you.
Stop. Now, if you're FBI director, don't you think it's pretty incumbent upon you to be briefed by as many people as possible, particularly in light of the fact that all this stuff is at issue these days, and that you really ought to, as FBI director, well paid as you are into six figures, that you would really want to be very well briefed and not appear to be a pus-ridden fool in front of Congress. So when he says he's not familiar with these things and with these people, do you buy that?
And is this the same Peter Strzok who helped, was a key player in the Russian investigation, and the same Peter Strzok who was put on Mueller's team, Special Counsel Bob Mueller's team?
I certainly know that he was working on the Special Counsel's investigation. Whether or not he would be characterized as a key player on that investigation, that's really not for me to say.
And the same Peter Strzok that we learned this past...
Do you think he knows? I bet.
This weekend was removed from the special counsel team because he exchanged text messages with a colleague at the FBI that displayed a pro-Clinton bias. Is that accurate?
Pro-Clinton bias, he ain't going to buy that.
Yes. Talk about the same guy. Okay.
Yes.
Well, here's what I'm not getting. Peter Strzok is selected to be on Mueller's team after all this history, put on Mueller's team, and then he's removed for some pro-Clinton text messages.
Thanks, Jim. Pointing out the obvious. Continue.
I mean, there are all kinds of people on Mueller's team who are pro-Clinton. There's been all kinds of stories. PolitiFact reported 96% of the top lawyers' contributions went to Clinton or Obama.
Let me tell you one fact that you may not have known, that you may not have heard. Every lawyer that's working on Mueller's team, every one of them all, not one, is a Republican. Is that a clue?
But Peter Strzok, the guy who ran the Clinton investigation, interviewed Mills, Abedin, interviewed Secretary Clinton, changed gross negligence a crime to the term extreme carelessness, who ran the Russian investigation, who interviewed Mike Flynn, gets put on Mueller's team, and then he gets kicked off for a text message that's anti-Trump. If you kicked everybody off Mueller's team who was anti-Trump, I don't think there'd be anybody left. So here there's got to be something more here. It can't just be some text messages that show a pro-Clinton, anti-Trump bias. There's got to be something more. And I'm trying to figure out what it is. But my hunch is it has something to do with the dossier. Director did...
Okay, stop right now. Stop right now. I have said this. I am alleging this. I do not know for a fact. But consider when you look at... if you're handed a case as a detective, as I was... you look at the totality of the evidence. You look for trends. You look for patterns, things that you can identify, on which you can place a fairly certain hat that you're moving in the right direction in terms of an investigation. So all of these things don't occur in a vacuum. All of these things are inexorably linked, because it was the Democrats, Hillary Clinton et al., that decided on November 9th that the newest meme was going to be Trump, Russia, 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 Trump, Russia. Here's what I believe happened. Money was paid by the DNC and other elements of the Democrats, and I think also by the FBI, to have Steele across the pond create this dossier to muddy up the waters regarding Donald Trump. This was going to be used as evidence, and I believe was used as evidence in a FISA court to acquire a warrant to go after Trump and all of his associates. Here's why. The first time they went into the FISA court, and a FISA court is almost kind of like a grand jury in a ham sandwich. Not exactly so, but damn close. The first time they went with whatever evidence that they had at that time, they were refused. So in their infinite wisdom, they decided it was time to go back and just fabricate shit out of whole cloth. Hence the dossier, which John McCain, by the way, had his hands on and sent people to Canada and across the pond on behalf of John McCain in order to investigate about this so-called dossier, which had Trump pissing on beds in Russia. This dossier was then used as evidence to submit for a FISA warrant. Now, with that in consideration, can you now begin to grok the concept and understand why no one wants to say anything about this? Why the FBI isn't talking, why the NSA isn't talking, why the alphabet agencies aren't talking, why the DOJ isn't talking, why the people on top aren't talking, the people in the middle aren't talking? There's so much more that's going to be revealed, and we will find out, I am convinced, that this is all bullshit predicated upon a house of cards that is going to come tumbling down very soon. We're going to come back to that cut because there's oh so much more buttery goodness in that. I've got another clip that I'm going to play after that. But I want to display for you so that you understand this is a soft coup in America. This is not the America that I knew.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American maggots won't. BZ is fundamentally changing America one diaper at a time. Just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, where the speech is free, but the drinks are not. The bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night, commencing at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, where pushback is a requisite art form in and of itself. Let your ossicles be truly liberated when you listen to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, only on SHR Media Network. No ferrets were harmed in the making of this ad.
When dirty politicians, shadow governments, and deceptive Islam blind the world with fake stream media smoke, their only fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through SHRmedia.com, HighPlainsTalkRadio.com, and the Western Free Radio Network at Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes for a different perspective weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on BlogTalkRadio.com. There's
no surrender ever,
because truth is not always pleasant.
This is Sam on SHR Media. You can listen to my new show starting on Tuesdays in January. Get my perspective on national politics, a conservative's perspective on California politics, the latest in the war on terror, all of that and a lot more here on Tuesdays at SHR Media. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Sam_SHR Media.
Human by race, Christian by faith, American by nationality, and conservative by choice. Reverend Ralph J. Chittum Sr. is the right guy on SHR Media from 8:05 to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. And if on the rare occasion I am ever wrong, I will still always be right. The right guy on SHR Media.
Beware, the Jersey Takeover is here. Every Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can catch Reaver Common Sense Show hosted by Jersey Joe, right here on SHRmedia.com. Only Jersey can deliver hell like no one else. So consider this your fair warning.
In a world controlled by corrupt politicians, a team of ordinary men emerge from the ashes to give voice to the voiceless, hope to the hopeless, clues to the clueless. Sackheads Sean, Sackheads Clint, and Sackheads BZ. The Sackheads Radio Show every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern on SHRmedia.com. Watch on YouTube, Facebook, and the High Plains Pundit Network. The best in late-night conservative talk, the Sackheads Radio Show, only on the SHR Media Network.
Go ahead, I'll say it. Some of the best A-roll is going to be B-roll.
Like, what are you talking about? You can just, the last question, you cut a couple seconds. Yeah, I'm a freaking artist. I can't just come up with this shit off the top of my head. Are you freaking kidding me right now?
Good point. Exactly right.
Hey, this is Sackhead Clint, and I'm with Sackhead Sean, Sackhead BZ. No communists allowed on the SHR Media Network.
Damn straight, mister.
Back to the show.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, live and direct here on the SHR Media Network. We had earlier tonight author Terrence McCauley. Now we're talking about basically what I consider to be the soft coup that's occurring currently under our very noses in D.C. And we were also listening to a cut where Representative Jim Jordan was talking to the new FBI director, Christopher Wray, about what was going on in the Mueller investigation. Let's continue.
Peter Strzok helped produce and present the application to the FISA court to secure a warrant to spy on Americans associated with the Trump campaign.
There you go. Looking for a link? Think you found one.
Congressman, I'm not prepared to discuss anything about a FISA process in this setting.
We're not talking about what happened in the court. We're talking about what the FBI took to the court, the application. Did Peter Strzok, was he involved in taking that to the court?
I'm not going to discuss in this setting.
Why do you think that he is not going to discuss that? Because the FBI's fingerprints, and I suspect cash, are on that document.
Anything to do with the FISA court applications?
Well, let's remember a couple things, Director. And I know you know this. We've all been made aware of this in the last few weeks. Let's remember a couple things about the dossier. The Democrat National Committee and the Clinton campaign, which we now know were one and the same, paid the law firm, who paid Fusion GPS, who paid Christopher Steele, who then paid Russians, to put together a report that we call a dossier full of all kinds of fake news, National Enquirer garbage. And it's been reported that this dossier was all dressed up by the FBI, taken to the FISA court, and presented as a legitimate intelligence document, basis for granting a warrant to spy on Americans.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering if that actually took place. It sure looks like it did. And the easiest way to clear it up is for you guys to tell us what was in that application.
Now, let me ask again the obvious. Let me put on my Captain Obvious cape and say this. And I know I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to because I can. I'm retired. I don't have to answer to these people. But I'll tell you an axiom in the world of law enforcement. When someone doesn't deny a charge, your little spidey sense ought to be tingling and the hairs on your back ought to go up. Because how easy would it be for the FBI, if they were not complicit in any way whatsoever, to say, Representative Jordan, I beg to differ. I'm the new FBI director. I was just seated. I've been briefed as much as possible on this issue, and I can assure you, with no reservation whatsoever, that what you're alleging here did not happen. The FBI would not conduct themselves in that fashion. Do you hear that denial?
Who took it there?
Congressman, our staffs have been having extensive interaction with both intelligence committees on our interaction with the FISA court, and I think that's the appropriate setting for those questions.
Here's what I think, Director Wray. I think Peter Strzok, head of counterintelligence at the FBI, Peter Strzok, the guy who ran the Clinton investigation, did all the interviews, Peter Strzok, the guy who was running the Russian investigation at the FBI, Peter Strzok, Mr. Super Agent at the FBI, I think he's the guy who took the application to the FISA court. And if that happened, I mean, think if this happened...
Stop. I know what he's going to say. I'll say it for him, and then I'll listen to how he phrases things. Think of this. Does this rise to the level of... I lived this time. I lived it through the 70s, and so I remember all this shite. But what do we have in the United States when you have an individual who was duly elected and adhered to the rule of law and has been inaugurated as President of the United States January 20th of this year? What do you have when you have not just civilians, but elements of the federal government plotting and planning against that particular one individual to the point that they would consider taking falsified documents to a FISA federal court and attempting to acquire a warrant to look into the background in what I consider to be a fishing expedition for Donald Trump? That's called the fruit of the poisonous tree, and it's going to land on everyone's arse. There's going to be more information coming out about this. But to think that the federal government, you want collusion? Here's the collusion Alphabet agencies versus Donald Trump and the administration because they don't like him, because he doesn't play the game. Say what you will about Donald Trump. Frequently, he can be a fucktard, but he's our duly elected president of the United States.
If you had the FBI working with a campaign, the Democrats' campaign, taking opposition research, dressing it all up and turning it into an intelligence document and taking it to the FISA court so they could spy on the other campaign, if that happened, that is as wrong as it gets. And you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. You could clear it all up. You could clear it all up for all of us here, all the Congress who wants to know, and frankly, all of America who wants to know. You could clear it all up by release. We sent you a letter 2 days ago. Just release the application. Tell us what was in it. Tell us if I'm wrong. But I don't think I am. I think that's exactly what happened. And if it did, it is as wrong as it can be. And
this is the crux of the biscuit. This is it right here. Everything else is peripheral. And I said I've been writing this post called The Hard Expectations of a Soft Coup, because that's what this is. This is a soft coup in America, and you're watching it happen before your eyes. But this gets down to the crux of the biscuit. This is so incredible. How can you trust almost any element in the United States federal government anymore? What do you have when you have an FBI that cannot be trusted? What do you have when you have a Department of Justice that cannot be trusted? What do you have when you have a Senate, a Congress that cannot be trusted? To whom do you fucking go for justice anymore?
And people who did that need to be held accountable.
Congressman, we will not hesitate to hold people accountable after there has been an appropriate investigation, independent and objective, by the Inspector General into the handling of the prior matter. And based on that, I will look at all available remedies, depending on what the facts are when they are found. As to the access to the dossier, that's something that is subject of ongoing discussion between my staff and the various intelligence committees.
There's nothing prohibiting you, Director.
Wait, stop. All he's saying is that he'll talk to the intelligence committees, he'll talk to the other intelligence agencies, he'll talk to the FBI itself, various elements of the FBI itself. Who runs these guys? Congress? Various committees? Do they set their budget? What is Christopher Wray essentially saying at this point? How do you interpret that? There's only one way that I think that that can be interpreted, and if I have time to go into another story after this, I will. There's only one way to be interpreted, and that is this. We don't answer to you. We don't answer to you, Jimmy. We do what we can when we want.
Is there anything prohibiting you from showing this committee what was presented to the FISA court? The application you all put together at the FBI that was presented to the FISA court. Is there anything preventing you from showing us that?
Yes. Okay, and if you want to go into closed session so that it's not public, to go ahead and do it and satisfy members of Congress, you should. Listen.
Time the gentleman has expired. The director can respond.
I do not believe that I can legally and appropriately share a FISA court submission with this committee.
I'm talking about what the FBI put together, not what the court had, what you took there, what was the process put together.
I wish you could see this video. I wish you could look at the look of Christopher Wray on his face. He has a look of absolute and utter disdain and disgust for having to sit in that seat and answer to someone like Jim Jordan from Ohio. This is beneath him. This is just like the Clintons. To have to be accountable for their actions is absolutely anathema. The look of disgust on his face disgusts me.
What you presented, what you took to the court.
When I sign FISA applications, which I have to do almost every day of the week, they are all covered with a classified information cover. So that's part of why we
is
would
it
not
likely
be
that
discussing
Peter
it here.
So who can know about that information? Who gets to know about that information? Only the FBI? Only the DOJ? Only the NSA? Only the intelligence community? If they don't speak to the leaders of the free world, the nation, the United States of America, to whom do they answer? Because it is upon this information and intelligence upon which the leaders of the United States and Congress make their decisions about the future of the United States. This is a coup.
Is it likely that Peter Strzok played a part in the application presented to the FISA court?
The gentleman's time has expired. However, I do want to follow up on your last response to the gentleman. This committee, the House Judiciary Committee, has primary jurisdiction over the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
Thank you.
So any request for documents coming to any part of the Congress should include the House Judiciary Committee, and if it is classified in any way, shape, or form, it can be provided to us in a classified setting. But that is information that we are very much interested in.
Mr. Chairman.
And he didn't want to give it to them. Listen to what he says now.
Want to receive.
Just a question to the chairman. Yeah, I don't think there's anything prohibiting the FBI from giving us what they used to put together what was taken to the FISA court. That's what we're asking for, and there is nothing prohibiting him from doing that.
I don't think there is either. The time
Bingo.
has expired, however.
Bingo. End of statement. Then did you hear this today? This just came out. It just keeps getting better. And the pit is being dug deeper and deeper. This is from CNS News. I had to go to Canada to find out this. I think maybe I need to turn my volume down a little bit because I'm screaming just a hair. I'm fired up. I'm sorry if I'm 210 over 190. I get to be this way. It's my show. Here's from a Canadian website. The headline is Judicial Watch. State Department cut deal for Clinton, Hillary Clinton, to keep call logs secret. Aberdeen took, quote, Muslim engagement documents. Are you hearing this on NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, MSNBC? No. The government watchdog group Judicial Watch released documents today from the U.S. State Department showing that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and her top aide Huma Abedin were allowed to remove, quote, remove electronic and physical records under a claim they were personal materials and unclassified non-record materials, including files on Clinton's telephone calls and schedules that were not to be made public. Let's see. If you or I worked in the government and we did this, I wonder what would happen. That's a head scratcher. In addition, the documents show that Abedin took five boxes of physical files from the State Department that included records marked Muslim engagement documents. All of these records were obtained through a Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA request made by Judicial Watch. We already know the Obama State Department let Hillary Clinton steal and then delete her governmental emails, which included classified information, said Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton in a statement. But these new records show that was only part of the scandal. These new documents show the Obama State Department had a deal. The Obama State Department cut a deal with Hillary Clinton to hide her call logs and schedules, which would be contrary to FOIA and other laws, he said. When are the American people going to get an honest investigation of the Clinton crimes? The FOIA request asked for any and all DS 1904 authorization for the removal of personal papers and non-record materials forms completed by or on behalf of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, former Chief of Staff Cheryl Mills, former Deputy Chief of Staff Huma Abedin, and former Deputy Chief of Staff Jacob Sullivan. The documents included, according to Judicial Watch, a list of official and personal calls and schedules that Clinton removed, which carry a special notation that the documents were not to be made public records. A deal, an agreement. A note for those records signed by State Department official Clarnce N. Finney, Jr., states that the Secretary's call log, grid, and schedules are not classified. However, they would not be released to the general public under FOIA. They are being released to the Secretary with this understanding. This stinks. Other records taken included an electronic copy of data daily files, an electronic copy of logs of calls the secretary made since 2004, an electronic copy of the secretary's call grid, and 45 boxes of Clinton's personal and public schedules. According to Judicial Watch, the documents also indicate that Clinton removed a physical file of the log of the secretary's gifts with pictures of gifts. But wait, there's more. I want you to hear this. This is one of my favorite individuals named Trey Gowdy. And here he's speaking with Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who is as complicit in what I consider to be a RICO as anyone else.
A lot of issues that I would like to ask you about, Mr. Deputy Attorney General. We had a terrorist incident in New York this week. We have 702 reauthorization that is pending in Congress. Gun violence, the opioid epidemic, criminal justice reform. But when I go home to South Carolina this weekend, trust me when I tell you, no one is going to ask me about any of those issues. They're going to ask me, what in the hell is going on with the Department of Justice and the FBI? The reason we have special counsel, this is a very important point, and you know it, the reason we have special counsel is because of a conflict of interest. The regulation itself specifically makes reference.
Or because the DOJ or the agency affected cannot be trusted to conduct the investigation honestly.
To a conflict of interest. And we don't like conflicts of interest because it undercuts people's confidence in both the process and the result. So let's be really clear why we have special counsel. There was either a real or perceived conflict of interest that we were fearful would either impact the result or people's confidence in the process. That's why we have something called special counsel, and that's why we have special counsel in this fact pattern. And then, lo and behold, those who are supposed to make sure there are no conflicts of interest seem to have a few of their own. There's a senior prosecutor who sent obsequious emails to a fact witness. She can be described as nothing other than a fact witness. She's a really important fact witness if you pursue the line of inquiry that my Democrat friends want to pursue. They got off of collusion, and now they're on obstruction of justice. She may be the most important fact witness in an obstruction of justice case. And the senior prosecutor for this conflict of interest-free special counsel sent a fawning, obsequious email to a fact witness. And then we have prosecutors assigned to conduct this investigation who donated almost exclusively to one candidate over another. And then we have a prosecutor assigned to this conflict of interest-free team that attended what was supposed to be, what he'd hoped to be, a victory party for Secretary Clinton. And we have a senior DOJ official, Mr. Deputy Attorney General, with an office that used to be 2 doors down from yours.
That is Orr, O-H-R, and he's gone. His wife had ties to GPS, to Fusion GPS, the company that went out to acquire the dossier. And they're investigating? They're on Mueller's team? What did I tell you? Not one Republican on Mueller's team. Not one.
Meeting with Fusion GPS, and Fusion GPS, of course, was paying for Russian dirt on the very person that they're supposed to be objectively investigating. And then that same senior DOJ official's wife, the one that met with Fusion GPS, his wife was on the payroll of Fusion GPS. And then
that was Orr and his wife. His wife's name was Elaine.
Then we have a senior agent assigned to investigate Secretary Clinton's email, help draft the exoneration letter.
Do you see? Do you understand how inextricably woven and dovetailed this is?
Change the language from grossly negligent to extremely careless. interviewed Secretary Clinton in an interview I've never seen, and I doubt you have either in your career as a prosecutor. Interviewed Michael Flynn, was actively involved in the investigation into the Trump campaign.
Stop just for a second. He mentioned Michael Flynn. What do you think Michael Flynn's attorney is doing right now when all of this stuff now is starting to come up? Do you think Michael Flynn's attorney is drafting a refutation of what happened to his client? That he's drafting an appeal? An easy appeal. I could argue, a 5-year-old could argue this appeal in court. It just made it so much easier for Flynn, or essentially anything that stems from Mueller's investigation. Fruit of the poisonous tree.
Before the Inspector General found his text. So this agent, in the middle of almost everything related to Secretary Clinton and President Trump, sent pro-Clinton texts, anti-Trump texts to his paramour in response to being told maybe he is where he is to protect the country from that menace, Donald Trump. He said...
Right. Do you think Strzok has delusions of grandeur because he can do it? He's super FBI agent.
I can protect our country at many levels. And then he said Hillary Clinton should win 100 million to nothing. Now think about that, Mr. Deputy Attorney General. That's a pretty overwhelming victory.
I wish you could again see the video. Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein is smiling because to him, this shit's funny.
100 million to zero. And when I read that last night, what I thought was this conflict of interest free.
He's still smiling. This is so funny to see Trey Gowdy cork off.
Senior agent of the FBI can't think of a single solitary American who would vote for Donald Trump. That's where the zero comes in. Not a single solitary American he can imagine would vote for Donald Trump. This is the conflict of interest free special agent assigned. And then he went on, if that weren't enough, to belittle Trump supporters by saying he could smell them at a Walmart in Virginia.
There's no bias there, though, right? No bias. No bias in Mueller's team. Okay, yeah, Strzok is gone. This is only one guy. What do we know about all of them? All the rest of them are Democrats. All the rest of them contributed money. Almost all of them. Actually wrote checks to the Democrats. But no, that's not a clue. That's not a clue. Listen, in D.C., attorneys are a dime a dozen. You can't walk out of any door without crashing into 15 of them. If you couldn't, in D.C., come across an attorney that didn't have a partisan direction one way or the other? Are you kidding me?
This is the person we needed to avoid a conflict of interest. And then he said this, they fully deserve to go and demonstrate the absolute bigoted nonsense of Trump. But he wasn't content to just disparage Donald Trump. He had to disparage Donald Trump's family. This is what he said, Mr. Deputy Attorney General. He said the douchebags are about to come out. He's talking about our First Lady and children. This conflict of interest-free special agent of the FBI. This is who we were told we needed to have an objective, impartial, fair, conflict of interest-free investigation. So he's openly pulling for the candidate he had a role in clearing, and he's openly investigating a candidate.
He had a role in clearing.
Candidate that he has bias against. And then if that's not enough, he says Trump is an effing idiot. What the F just happened to our country? This is the same man that said he would save our country.
What the fuck is happening to our country right now?
What happens when people who are supposed to cure the conflict of interest have even greater conflicts of interest than those they replace? That's not a rhetorical question. You nor I nor anyone else would ever sit Peter Strzok on a jury. We wouldn't have him objectively, dispassionately investigate anything, knowing what we know now. Why didn't we know it ahead of time? And my last question, my final question to you, and I appreciate the chairman's patience, how would you help me answer that question when I go back to South Carolina this weekend?
Trey Gowdy. I couldn't have said it better myself. I have so much more material. You should see what's on my computer. If you have Windows and you run tabs on whatever search engine you have, I have 27 tabs open right now of stories to tell you just like this one. I'm out of time. And I have to go. But I think I've got a few tales to tell come next Tuesday. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I'm calmer now. I'm better now. Thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, right here on the SHR Media Network. This is where you need to be to hear things like this, assembled just for you. You want to contact me? You can go to my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net. You want to ship me an email? Lots of people do, not necessarily good ones. bz@shrmedia.com. Promotional consideration is by Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. And also Pratt & Whitney Engines, thrust you can trust. And thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, with which I will be consorting in less than an hour, and oh fuck me, do I ever need it tonight. And thank you ever so kindly for listening live. I gotta say thanks to Terrence McCauley. Thank you for being involved in the chat room. Thanks for listening in podcast. Folks, God bless. Take care. You be safe.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.